All right, with that, we will call the Tuolumne County Transit Agency meeting to order. This will be the opportunity for oral communication to allow the public to speak on any item not on the printed agenda.
So I was at the County Board of Education on Monday, and one of the issues that came up for them was the conversion of their buses to electric. So I think I contacted Darren and some other people because the superintendents now are getting concerned. And I went up to Twinehart, and they want to buy some new vehicles, and they didn't seem to be aware of the state mandates for conversion to electric vehicles. So we need some outreach, or we need to get everybody in the same room so that everybody understands what the mandates are and the concerns. So I suggested that the county superintendent has a meeting of superintendents for all the districts, and maybe they need to invite Darren and have a conversation about that. Thank you.
No worries. If I may respond,
Please do.
be happy to talk with the superintendents. They are on our steering committee or stakeholders group for the electric vehicle readiness planning. And we did send out surveys to all the fleet managers in the county, and I did ask Alex earlier this week to just make sure that those folks that represent the school bus fleets have responded to our surveys so that we can re-engage them down the road and make them part of our conversion plan. If we didn't get it from them, we're going to do a secondary effort to get them involved.
Okay.
So it's good. Timing's good.
So this is at each of the school districts?
Yeah, and what we offer is to review their fleet. They got to fill out a form on how many vehicles they have, how they use them, and how many miles and different things. And then the consultant will give them back a plan on what they'll need for buses and how to electrify your fleet and cost and grant opportunities, and all that information is free of charge. We'll give it back to them as fleet managers.
Okay. All right, we good? Sounds good, thank you. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, I'll go to consent calendar. Item 2, approval of the March 13, 2019 meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion in a second, or is there any public comment?
Okay. I'll go ahead and move on consent calendar of the minutes that are here at the dais.
Second.
Okay, motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Kind of quiet. Maybe I gotta get moving. All right, thank you. Regular agenda item 3, approval of an agreement for Tuolumne County Transit Advertising Sales Program Management with Helen Foraker Advertising.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as some of you long-timers around here might remember, Paulo Maffei pushed us good and hard to do more advertising on our buses, and we gave it a shot, and we were mildly successful in our advertising efforts. And then we decided it made sense to see if we can't tap into some private enterprise capitalism efforts, entrepreneur efforts, and we put out an RFP a while back. We were able to secure Helen Foraker as a salesperson to sell the ads on the buses as well as inside the buses. She's done a remarkable job generating $100,000 a year in revenue. We split the sales 50-50, and it's been very successful. We're able to put that into our fare box to help meet state minimum requirements for fare box requirements. We do still continue to show what it is without that added into the fare box, so that we're always looking at apples to apples numbers. But that said, her contract expired in December, and we have solicited proposals from potential advertisers, and we only got one proposal from Helen, and we've negotiated an agreement. I think you've got signatures on that agreement before you, and we're happy to recommend approval of this contract. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
The one question I had is the 50-50, is that typical of those kinds of arrangements? seemed like a 50-50 split is kind of high in my mind.
It's what other counties are doing, so I guess you could say it's typical. We did give an opportunity if there were other proposers to propose other ratios.
Sure.
You know, and that would go into our consideration, but given that we only have one, it's a pretty limited business in terms of who does it. She's very, very good at it. And she's secured contracts with us, Calaveras,
I see
Amador.
Mendocino she's got
Mendocino,
now
yeah.
is added as well.
She's
so,
doing well.
Yeah. So, okay. I was just
I
curious.
don't know that she has any competition out there, so. It's a very kind of behind-the-scenes business, but she's successful.
Yeah.
And we put it out there, we put it in the paper, we put it on our website. We tried to see if there's anyone else interested. Not that we wouldn't be happy to have Helen working for us again, but
Yeah.
give
No, it
everybody
seems like
a
a
shot.
great arrangement. I just was
Yeah.
curious about that split.
Yeah.
That's all.
Other questions? Public comment?
You thought
Man, that sounded like, that was like a basketball move. You almost faked me out and you were going to the bucket.
He's going to do some reports.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve an agreement for Tuolumne County Transit Advertising Sales Program Management with Helen Oraker Advertising.
I'll second that.
We have motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Item 4, reports.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll start off by letting you know that one of your Citizen Advisory Committee members, Harry Olds, has chosen to resign for personal reasons. And Harry wasn't on the committee a real long time, but he is very helpful, and we appreciate how he's helped us out. I should note that we have struggled with attendance, so if you have a vacancy in your district, by all means, try and recruit somebody. We did show some of our attendance charts there for you to look at. We did not have a quorum for either the CAC or the TAC at our last meeting. Obviously, it's important that we get input from a broad source of folks from city, county, and citizens as well. So we certainly want to do that, and participation has been waning lately, so leave it at that.
Could I make a suggestion that maybe the chairman send a real nice pointed letter to all of our partners and tell them how important it is to attend these meetings and see if we can get better participation?
I could
We'll work
prepare a
with
letter
you.
if you like.
We'll work with you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do that.
I'm not trying to shame anybody here, but
Yeah,
it's
well,
important.
You know, you got to be there at the table or you're going to get
Left
missed.
out.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can't. Yeah, I got to represent your specific area or
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, will do.
And as far as vacancies, you know, I've got one District 4, and then District 2, you got a vacancy.
Although that
No.
person just got appointed.
That one just got
It
filled.
just got filled, okay. So District 5, we don't have, maybe you could send a letter to the supervisor.
You
of
think so?
District 5 and ask him if he would be more aggressive in trying to find somebody.
So we can always count
Just to
baby
send-
girl as a vote.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion.
She's been absent too, it looks
Got
like.
baby girl on there.
Just a suggestion, but I'll work on,
Represents the canine community.
Yeah.
I will work on District 4 again.
And we have one in the city
It'd
as
be
well.
nice to get somebody from down
That'd be good.
off the hill here.
Well, you get two, one
know.
for up the hill and one down the hill.
Yeah, and we just need
So
to
it
find,
has to be somebody down the hill
Yeah.
for that second spot.
yeah,
Yeah, what does he get to?
okay, we'll work on that. We'll work on that.
Okay, that's all I have on that. I'm going to turn over to Tyler for some reports on yards.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So one of the things that we got as part of our participation in the short-range transit plan update for yards were some Tuolumne County-specific deliverables. And we have talked about those in the last few months. But one that we just recently got and we kind of felt real strongly about this and was unique to our corridor was a ridership profile. We pushed hard initially for kind of the website and online booking capability, and then from that, the amount of data that we can mine about where people are coming from and some of the choices they're making, it can be really insightful. So this actually just recently got appended to the short-range transit plan, and so we're just now presenting it. But it's an item that I gave to you here before the meeting, and there's also copies in the back. But I thought it's significant just to point out a few things. So this is for last year, but we had nearly 900 reservations for the system. So this is during the study period, which is just 1 year. So internationally, that represented people booking tickets from 29 different countries. Granted, the United States made up the bulk of that, but significantly, almost 20% of folks booking coming from the Europe area, and of those primarily England and Germany. But of course, in those 29 countries, you get a pretty good cross-section. And then in the U.S., 39 different states are booking, tickets. And the high percentages there, of course, California, followed by New York, Florida, and Texas. And then interestingly, within California itself, 17% of our folks coming from the greater Bay Area, which is significant, I think, because we've been arguing, that there's a potential route that makes sense to just come from the Bay Area directly here and not deviate to go south and then come into the park. It's the quickest route. But also, almost 13% of folks coming from the south, bypassing 2 other gates to then come in through Tuolumne County. So there's just some things to noodle in the report. I think that's one of them. And then 5% of the overall ridership that's booking online is local Tuolumne County traffic. And so, one other thought here is it's not necessarily a one-for-one because you can have one reservation that covers more folks. So you have a family of 4, it's one reservation, but you've got 4 travelers. So,
Right. So these numbers represent the reservations, not the actual count.
That's right. That's
Gotcha.
right.
So, in looking at this, it looks like it coincides with the outreach that the Visitors Bureau is doing in some of those other countries, they targeted the United Kingdom, and that's one of the biggest. So that relationship working together, between YARTS and the Visitors Bureau, I think is a big thing. I mean, these people are staying here. That's the important thing, and they're spending a lot of money. I just printed out, and I left it on my desk, the number of reservations for so far this year is over 1,000 for this corridor. And I don't know if you have it there, but this is just the beginning. We haven't even got into the season, so it could be really big. But that link to that Bay Area, that's got to be something. I thought that when we did, when they were going to do that YARTS study, that they were going to include that Bay Area route within the grant that they were looking at. Now, apparently they didn't, but is that something that we can look at? Is there a way of, is there money available that we can look at that possibility of, for YARTS, but mostly for us to see if that's something that can be done?
Yeah. So I think, we've got an item coming up on the next agenda, which is the short-range transit plan and coordinated plan. I think that'll be a good opportunity to take a real close look at that. Previously we did have Yosemite feasibility study, so I think some of the data and the route has been looked at, and then we kind of got a cursory review as part of the short-range transit plan for Yosemite. But as considering we weren't the primary contractee, I think the most of the focus was on the 140 route. So yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. And I think moving forward, when we see great numbers here, and we start thinking about the service in our corridor, opportunities to, continue to partner with the Visitors Bureau, as you mentioned, they've been an incredible partner, but then also, beginning to formalize improvements within the community, Sonora, Groveland, Jamestown, to serve these passengers, because the number of folks, choosing this method of transportation seems to grow. Every year it has grown, and in some years it's been exponential, 80, 90%. So, starting to create facilities for some of the larger buses to stop, in downtowns and along our route, I think would, further support, this mode.
Are you going to the partners meeting tomorrow?
I will be, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Might be an opportunity to, well, you always do anyway, but, and I'll make mention if I have the opportunity with the park superintendent, we have a private meeting in May, and to bring up the increased ridership just on that 120 corridor, because I don't really think he sees those numbers, quite honestly. They focus on Mariposa and don't realize that most of the people are coming in the other corridors. So we need to sell out a little bit.
Yeah, will do.
And related to what Tyler's comment was about facilities, is we do pick up at Laveroni Park, and I should note, and you, John, know that they broke ground now on some of those electric vehicle chargers.
Monday.
So it'd be a great mix of having people park there, charge their vehicle, and ride yards in. And then, of course, in the morning when before they get on the bus, maybe grabbing breakfast in town and dinner afterwards, or maybe staying the night. So
Well, that's happening with the Tesla. I mean, the people that are using that Tesla charging station are walking around town. You got an hour to waste in Groveland. It's not a very big town, so you're going to probably eat something most of the time.
Yeah.
It's just,
and that's kind of the vision we have with the city, with the new bus stop proposed at Stockton Road and 49, and maybe some chargers going in some of those public parking lots. And then later we can maybe replicate in Jamestown and a few other locations. So that's good stuff.
I had a question for Tyler. On this last page, you have the graph of the four different routes. I was just curious if you have total number of reservations for each four of those routes and how we compare to the rest somewhere. I'd be curious.
I do, and I can get those for you.
That'd be great. I'm just curious how we stack against the rest.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible because, we have, just as we've outpaced the other corridors in the reservations, when you look at the individual numbers, we outpace them in, drawing from the Bay Area, drawing from Sacramento, drawing from Southern California.
Yeah,
It's
that's
really
amazing.
That's
Interesting
really
thing.
I was surprised when I saw that.
incredible, especially when you think that 140 has got way more runs than we do, and we've got 3 runs. They've got 12. And not that we are generating more overall volume than they are, although in some cases we are. And the same goes for Fresno. They've got 6 to 8 runs, so more than double, and we are still. And I do believe it's because Tuolumne County is such an incredible place, as far as a destination, but also the impact of the Visitors Bureau, their role, and really kind of taking this on with us has been unique, and not all the other corridors have had that kind of support. So we definitely appreciate them.
Cool. Very good.
One other report while this thing's still in front of me here, which is I gave you all a Adventure Trolley brochure. The Adventure Trolley will start at the beginning of May 4th this year. This is another project that we are working with in concert with the Visitors Bureau. They have ensured that all the fares for all the riders will be free of charge. This is a Saturday service that'll run every Saturday from May all the way through, the end of our heavy visitor period, which is September. Last year was the very first year we did this. We're paying for the service through the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, which are transit-specific dollars coming from the greenhouse gas market. But we're really excited about this year. This is year 2. Last year, we had a lot of work to do, just get the project approved, to get all the collateral, like the brochure you're holding, created. And then, of course, on top of that big push, we had the fires and kind of a cold start to the year. So this year, we're really excited to get out ahead of the ball, which we've done in creating these and posters. The Visitors Bureau helped us put together a short video of the route in action, with folks kind of, visiting each of the communities, which is, a neat component to be able to see that visually. And then for hotels and others, they can just be playing this in their lobbies as well. We'll have a special tour for all of our business and lodging partners later this month where their front desk staff can actually get on the bus and experience it firsthand. The Visitors Bureau made us buttons that say, ask me about the adventure trolley. So I think for kids who've already ridden the trolley, the cute sticker that says I rode the trolley, and we'll let their folks deal with where they put those. But so I think it's a program that we hope will help folks just park in a community, doesn't matter which one, and then be able to move to each of them, on the hour and a half throughout the day. So that will begin in May. We're excited about that. More information on the Visitors Bureau and the Tuolumne County.
Starts May 1, runs through the end of September?
Starts May
May
4, runs through the end of September, yes.
Okay.
Fireman's Muster Weekend in Columbia.
Yes.
Go.
Take the trolley to get there.
It's free.
Yeah.
It's free.
How do people get tickets for Yards?
They can get those online at yards.com, or they can come to Tuolumne County Transit and find out about the program and then link directly to Yards from there.
Okay,
Thank you.
just trying to get the word out.
And one last thing under reports related to Yards is we were, John and I went down Monday to the Yards board meeting where they approved an invitation to Tuolumne County to become a voting member of on the JPA for Yards. The way that would work, and we've talked about this in the past, I'll kind of reiterate it, is that their JPA is meant to work through boards of supervisors of multiple counties. So we would take the proposed amendment to the Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors for consideration to become a member of the Yards JPA. And then they would assign the roles and responsibilities related to fulfilling the obligation of being on Yards to the TCTC. Since we are so engaged on Yards activities, our thinking is they would have 2 Board of Supervisors members on the Yards. We think it should be both board members that sit on the TCTC. And that would play out over the next couple months, that process.
It's, we got a good welcome, but obviously it's because we are really successful in getting people on Yards. And, without being able to vote, it's really kind of difficult to strengthen your position. So, it would be money well spent. We're going to get it back tenfold collectively in all of the different communities. But I think what Darren explained is the right way to do it.
Okay. And I should probably note that their proposal is that our share, because every community contributes a share towards the Yards operation, is $68,400, which I think we looked at a couple other figures on Monday, and we are way lower than some of those communities.
I think Fresno was $690,000.
Make sure they don't see the ridership numbers.
So,
Yeah, we're getting a pretty good deal, and thank you to the park for covering so much of our operating
yeah,
costs.
they're covering the big.
So
big
we've
chunk.
already built this into our draft budget for the TCTA.
Okay, so let us know when it goes to the board or any other steps of progress.
Okay, we'll do. We'll keep you informed. And that's about it, other than, kudos to Tyler and Lisa Mayo for doing such a great job and working with, Yosemite Lakes, Rush Creek, all those partners, because without these two working with all those and them getting their buy-in and explaining how Yards works to their customers, we just don't have this kind of success. So, just want to thank you, Tyler.
Those numbers are amazing. Excellent work. I expected to see higher numbers with 41 from Southern California,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's not there,
And Fresno being so.
having lived down there years ago. All right, with that, we will adjourn. Any other reports? I'm sorry, Gregoria. Okay. With that, we'll adjourn the Tuolumne County Transit Agency. Give us a minute. Switch gears. All right, we'll call the Tuolumne County Transportation Council meeting to order. This would be the opportunity for oral communication to allow the public to speak on any item not on the printed agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carl Baker from Columbia. You might remember me as former Caltrans representative.
That's who you are.
Who are you?
You're kind of undercover.
The hat does wonders.
It's a good
The
hat.
hat in this.
It's a good
Well,
hat.
it covers retirement hair. Okay, so I have a couple items. Number one is an email that I gave you all a printout of. There's also one for Gregoria and
Denise.
for the record, for Denise, yeah. In this is about the new Fifth Avenue intersection, which was constructed without any way for pedestrians to cross the highway other than waiting for a car to come and trip the signal. This is sensitive to me because we've been living with this at Limekiln and 108 for years. It's in the RTP to fix it. If a car doesn't come, you look for a gap in traffic and you run across on the red. You have no other choice. So, you know, if you want a little thought experiment, let's take one day a year and make everything not work for cars unless a pedestrian comes along. When I look at so I reported this to Caltrans as a maintenance service request. Number one, because I found this out because I was on a bike. The bike didn't trip anything. So what do? I look for a push button, and there's nothing there. Maybe they can make an adjustment and make it work for bikes. In my maintenance service request response from Caltrans, they didn't actually address whether they made it work for bikes or not, and I'll get down there and check it at some point. But really, the bigger picture is, if I'm on a bike, I can go down the next intersection. But if I'm a pedestrian, I want to get across the highway. And we're not supposed to build projects that create barriers. Regardless, you know, I'm not saying we need crosswalks and ped heads, but we need a button that says push for green. I've looked that up in the CAMUTCD. They do have a sign. That's the traffic control device manual for California. Okay. They do have a sign that is for use for pedestrians for that very purpose. That's not the same as saying that the Caltrans Highway Design Manual says it's okay to do that. I didn't get any response from Caltrans along those lines. They simply said there's no sidewalks there, so we're not going to stripe and put in pedestrian improvements. In looking at the planning for the county, the general plan from the blueprint, from the health and all policies, it's all about creating the connectivity for bikes, peds, transit, everybody within our defined communities. This is in a defined community. It's defined as an urban street per the general plan. So this is a fumble by Public Works. They designed a project that doesn't comply with the general plan. It doesn't comply with the RTP. The RTP lists this and many other projects, almost all of the bike and ped projects in the RTP that are funded, that's Tier 1 ABC, are vehicular improvements with a complete street component. I understand why it's that way, and there's good reasons for that. But if we don't include complete streets in those projects, we have a problem. The real gist of this email is, do we need some sort of complete streets TAC? And that doesn't mean, do we get a couple old bike people to come and sniff the projects and say they're okay? There's transit, there's pedestrians, there's disabled, all of the stuff in the SysTac. That all should be considered before we put these projects forward to construction. Is it on me a little bit? First time you guys seen me in a year. I went with the retire, take a year off point of view, and now it's time I need to start speaking up about the things that I think are important. So there needs to be some more transparency and some more public review and input of these kinds of things that are happening with all of our agencies. We have some things happening that you may not be aware of. There's something called the Motherlode Bike Coalition, which started in the last couple years. It's building in Tuolumne County. We've got some people that are involved that want to try to help with these things. Like I said, it's not just bikes. We have the ATP coming up, which should have public scoping. We should look at that as an opportunity to build a community. You know, you talk about the CAC is withering, okay? Maybe we need to be broadening our scope to try to, you know, address some more of those community issues, make it more relevant to the community to get them involved. I would love to see either, you know, an emphasis on that in the CAC, or, like I say, a complete streets TAC that would meet with the CAC and the TAC. I don't have the solution. I'm just here to say, let's think about ways we can expand this scope and make it work better.
I don't want, I'm listening.
It's okay.
Makes sense, but, you know, on our agenda item 5, under the TCTC,
John, your mic.
we're looking at authorizing the executive side member understanding for promoting safe bicycle travel opportunities for bicycle tourism and economic development. Wouldn't what you're talking about fit into that
Well,
particular agenda item?
no, that's one particular grant that the county joined with other counties on.
Right.
So
But the subject matter is,
I don't, Darren?
And
may.
Carl, I need to point out, this is public comment, and it's not an agendized item, so.
No, I agree.
We're not taking
No,
any action.
I'm just saying.
just asking the question.
And that's why I'm giving this to you and saying, you know, be aware, and I think this is something that needs to come up.
I think that what Carl's pointing out is that we are doing plans, upcoming plans, and we've done plans, be it the general plan or RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, that we engage the community heavily on what they want, and those go into our plans. There's a disconnect between that planning process and the projects that are being built. And there needs to be a bridge there. And Carl suggested that they engage perhaps at our technical and citizen advisory committee. That doesn't presently happen. I think Carl's kind of right that there isn't really a process built into the public works process, other than when you see an item to certify an EIR or put a project out to bid, now the public can come up to the mic and maybe talk. Well, it's awful late in the game at that point to say, hey, your scope of work isn't quite right.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna tell you, well, it wasn't studying the environmental document, we can't do that. It needs to be at the project initiation phase that the public's weighing in. And I think it's a good suggestion, maybe go on the TAC, and I've asked David Gonzalez if he's interested in that, and we've yet to have a dialogue on that.
Okay.
Okay, so that's number one, and I think I've covered that. Duke said I could have his time too. Okay, why do we have complete streets as the focus of our Tier 1 projects, the actual funded projects? That's because in the RTP, there's a lot of stuff, but it boils down to this. We can't count on getting competitive grants to do specific bike ped projects in Tuolumne County because the rural counties compete so poorly in the active transportation program. The Legislative Analyst's Office, the LAO, just completed a review of the ATP per, the legislation. What did the legislation want the ATP to do, and is it accomplishing those goals? Well, the legislation didn't say geographic equity or equity for rural counties. So it's not studied in that report. When I worked for Caltrans, one of my little side projects always was to take all of these spreadsheets of the awards under the active transportation program and look at where the money went. I'm not worried about the metropolitan areas. They get their own money to run their own program. But there is the statewide and small urban program, and there is the competitive statewide program. Everybody competes under those. My perception is that some counties are raking it in. Typically, the small urban is doing well. The rural RTPAs are getting nothing, okay? My suggestion to you is that either as a board or through the Rural Counties Task Force or the RCRC, instead of me sitting at home with a bunch of spreadsheets and Wikipedia trying to figure out who's small urban and who is, a rural RTPA and get everyone in the right category, simply make a request to the CTC to they have spreadsheets for all of the different cycles that were funded, the first 4 cycles plus the cycle 3 supplemental, and put together a report. This county got this much gross, this county got this much per person, so that you can get an idea of what the actual facts are. Where do we really rate per person on getting that funding? I think it's way off. But there's no point in waiting for me to do it. I didn't get it done when I worked for Caltrans, and I won't get it done when I'm retired either. So that's just a suggestion. The last thing I had in getting ready to come down here was looking through some agenda reports, looking at some minutes. There was something in the February minutes where a member of the public asked for more public presentation or public representation on the board. They were discussing whether, to advertise for the public member position. The response from one of the board members was that the TCTC is a JPA that presides over complicated budgets requiring fiduciaries. He further explained that diverse opinions are not that relevant and that these types of decisions should be made by people that have a responsibility to the public, but not by the public themselves. I understand what minutes are, and I know Denise does her best. Minutes are always, a fuzzy mirror of what happened in the meeting. The TCTC is an RTPA, Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Budgets is part of the responsibility of the RTPA. But the responsibility of an RTPA is to have a fully comprehensive, inclusive planning process that reflects the needs of the community in order to be eligible for state and federal funding. They don't just give that money away, so that the city and the county can do whatever they want. they need to have a planning process. So I realize this is probably a skewed snapshot of something that was said, but I also feel like I can't see that and not say something about it. This is a planning agency. The work of the board is to consider the work of staff and whether it creates a balanced planning process that meets the needs of all of the community. Whether or not you have additional community members should be based on, number one, can you get anyone to apply for the position? Obviously, if you can't fill one, filling three is going to be hard. Calaveras has 3 public members. Amador has 1. When you have 3, then you can get into the supervisors fighting over how many of them came from whose district, and the same between the county and the city, and on, and they all have complications. But, you know, that should be out there. That's a choice the board should make, but it shouldn't be made about whether a public member has expertise on budgets. All boards should have that one person that just digs into budgets and grills the staff, and they all seem to. But there's also should be people who have, you know, experience from all walks of life and all kinds of needs on the transportation system so that you make good decisions. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks.
Any other oral communication? All right, consent calendar. Item 2, approval of the March 13, 2019 meeting minutes. Item 3, adopt resolution 597-19, amending the fiscal year 18-19 overall work program and budget summary to include the fiscal year 17-18 rural planning assistance and Federal Transit Administration 5304 unexpended balances or the carryover. And item 4, accepting the Board of Supervisors' recommendation of Paul Slummons, hope I said that right, as a representative of District 2 for the Citizens Advisory Committee. Is there any public comment?
I love you, Carl. You're so fabulous. So I went to there was a meeting where Paul Slummons came, and that was his first introduction to the Citizens Advisory Committee, and at that time, I believe he had already applied. So I thought that was really great, because your Citizens Advisory Committee meetings are something to suffer through, because in my opinion, Mr. Gray has only appointed one person who participates in that, and everybody just comes to eat chocolate. So he actually comes with some ideas and report and plans, and I would like to see people on that committee that come in with advisory issues to make suggestions to you. So I appreciate having somebody else on the committee that's coming in with new blood. And then I don't understand why adopting a resolution is on a consent calendar.
Any other public comment? All right, bring it back to the council. You ready for a motion? Does anybody want anything pulled?
Well, just for, we'll go ahead and I would like to pull number 3 just for discussion.
Okay.
And then I would move to approve the consent calendar, and then we can talk about number 3.
I'll second that.
Second that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Item 3, I'm not going to read it again, but item 3, adopt resolution 597-19, amending the fiscal year overall work program, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you can explain it further.
Sure. As you know, every year we adopt an annual work program that is tied closely to our annual operating budget, which you approve both of those documents. But on some years, we don't complete all the work tasks that are in there, and we need to carry over some funding to the following year. For instance, the FTA 5304 Complete Streets grant kind of got off to a late start. We spent a good part of the year bringing a consultant on board and figuring out the scope of work and doing a lot of coordination with Caltrans, since it is State Route 49 Complete Streets project that goes all the way along 49, as well as multiple other off-highway corridors for consideration for bike and ped facilities, from Jamestown to Sonora up to Columbia. We're well on our way onto that project, but we just didn't spend the money in a timely way, so we're carrying it over, which is allowed. And it also takes us a fair amount of time to get into the year fund balances. So we've got all that information from Debbie Batista, and we're ready to do our amendment. Caltrans allows us to do 4 amendments per year, and this will settle us up financially with Caltrans and carry it over in the following year.
Thank you.
Any questions? Good. Any other public comment? I'll entertain a motion in a second.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt Resolution 597-19, amending the fiscal year 2018-19 overall work program and budget summary to include years 17-18 rural planning assistance and federal transit administration 5304 unexpected balances carryover.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you. Regular agenda item 5. Authorize the executive director to sign the memorandum of understanding for promoting safe bicycle travel opportunities for bicycle tourism and economic development planning grant.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as you might recall, we did apply for a grant, and we were successful in getting an award from Caltrans through the Sustainable Communities Transportation Planning Grant in 2018. It's a partnership grant whereby we will be working with Calaveras Council of Governments, San Joaquin Council of Governments, Stanislaus County Council of Governments, Alpine Local Transportation Commission, and the nonprofit California Bicycle Coalition Education Fund, it's Cal Bike, on a bicycle tourism plan. TCTC is the lead among all those agencies. And the basic idea of this project is it's going to look at the interregional routes, primarily state highways, but perhaps some arterial roadways that connect counties, and identify, how much bicycle tourism is both on those roads as well as potential growth in that area, and then what some of the obstacles are. Some of our highways have nice 8-foot paved shoulders. Others have no shoulder whatsoever. Rumble strips are an issue for some bicyclists. Yeah. Perhaps some improved signage and whatnot is appropriate. The idea here is that this group will all work together to identify what the needs are. They'll engage bicycle communities and identify what improvements are needed in each of these corridors. It's important because Caltrans, with SB1, is required to do complete streets when they rehabilitate a highway. So if we have a section of highway, or in the other counties for that matter, and they're going to come in and do more than a chip seal or a crack seal, but actually a new paving job or rehabilitation, they'll look at our plans and they'll say, oh, well, the plan calls for a 5-foot shoulder here to accommodate bicyclists or pedestrians. Therefore, we're going to add that to the project scope of work. Kind of gets at what Carl's talking about a little bit, where you're starting to get your planning integrated into your projects. So that's the idea, or the basic outcome that we're looking for out of this whole effort. What this is today is an MOU between those partnering agencies, because each of the agencies is committed to both participation in the steering committee and a time commitment of their staff, as well as financial contributions. And on the advice of legal counsel, we have an MOU to kind of get everybody's boards bought into that and their budgeting the funding and their contribution. Next steps after we do the MOU will be to do a request for proposals to get a consultant on board to do the work. And then the final plan will be circulated among the various boards for approval. And of course, there'll be a public engagement process as well. So that's the idea of this project, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have about it.
I just want to point out that, that's a small contribution in relationship to the amount of grant, they're less than $7,000, so it really makes sense.
Yeah, completely agree. And I assume, you said there was going to be outreach. I mean, Carl mentioned the Mudload Bike Coalition. There'd be a
That
lot of,
group absolutely will be.
early on
They're
in the
people
process.
we're looking for mainly.
Exactly. Early on in the process, I think
Each
that's
county
key.
has different coalitions like that.
Cool. Great.
Bike, that's why we also partnered with the Coalition for Bicycles. They are kind of a unifying statewide organization that knows who all those stakeholders are in the different counties. And I think that they had a big role in our success in getting the funds as well.
Darren, what's a general or rough timeline from start to where you want to be?
I think we got a 2-year timeline on this, Alex. Yeah. It's a longer-term project. I think the whole thing is 3 years, which seems absurd to me. Although we're a little bit behind schedule, so you might see another item like the last one where we're carrying over. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if we aren't done well ahead of schedule. I could see this being done in a year.
Okay. Now, is there any nexus between this grant and the long sought-after corridor between Columbia, Sonora, Jamestown of the bike corridor? Is there, where this will help with that type of thing, or is this kind of a separate?
They're all interrelated. The one, which we call it the congested corridor plan or the complete streets plan, is ongoing. You're going to start seeing that heating up quite a bit here in the next month. That's a more focused on one area. That information will then upload into this plan. There'll be overlapping information there in both plans.
Okay.
Is the best way of putting it.
Okay.
Right, any other questions? Public comment?
Well, I think this is a great idea, so I support it. But building on what Supervisor Gray said, just because I know 9 people are going to watch this on TV, the grant was $318,503. The match is $41,387, which means each share would be $6,898, if I understood correctly.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion. Second.
Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize the Executive Director to sign the Memorandum of Understanding for promoting safe bicycle travel opportunities for bicycle tourism and economic development planning grant.
Second.
Got a motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Item 6, review the U.S. Environmental Protection, I can't speak all of a sudden. Review the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's new guidance on transportation conformity for the 97 and 2015 ozone standards.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as you might recall, we talked about this just a little bit at the last meeting where we talked about CMAQ funding, congestion mitigation air quality funds, and how we are now in a non-attainment for air quality and eligible to receive those funds again. And we actually decided to swap those funds with Metropolitan Transportation Commission of the Bay Area, whereby we give them this year's amount of funding, and they'll give us back funding a year from now after we've had a chance to kind of establish some priorities in the program. And we have received an agreement from them to begin that effort, so it's underway. But we felt it was probably appropriate just to talk about air quality in general, and it's a very confusing matter. So I'm going to let Alex give it a shot, and then I might have a few comments afterwards for clarification.
I got a little dizzy reading it.
It's easy.
Good luck, Alex.
So I just wanted to, we wanted to bring this item to the agenda just to kind of explain to the city, county, and the public the dynamics that are happening with ozone and the non-attainment. And it can be a confusing process, so we're hoping, we have a couple different attachments for the 97 and 2015 ozone standard. that'll hopefully help provide a little bit more guidance for this different procedures. And the last one was the flow chart, which we're hoping will help simplify that process for everyone. And I'll just give kind of a little basic understanding. So the U.S. Clean Air Act requires that federally funded or transportation projects that need federal approval are consistent with or conform to the state implementation plan. And essentially, conforming to the SIP means all transportation activities will not cause or contribute to a new air quality violation. And like Darren mentioned last month, there have been several court cases, and they've just been recently resolved, so we figured this was a good time to bring this forward. So for the 97 ozone standard was under litigation for a long time, and that standard's now back in effect as of February 16th, 2019. And the 2015 ozone standard will be effective come August 3rd, 2019. So this is a really good time for us to talk about it and mention it. And so essentially, what does this mean? So all transportation projects here in the Tuolumne County region are subject to transportation conformity. But in most cases, most projects can get either exemptions from conformity altogether, or they can get exemptions for the regional analysis, which as a rural isolated area, most of the conformity analysis aren't required for our particular region. So in our case, only regionally significant projects are subject to it. Now, the US EPA has some listing of projects that are exempt, but in a lot of cases, there's a lot of projects that are kind of on the fringe, where there's kind of confusion on if they're exempt or not exempt, or they might not be exempt at all. Then usually the first step in the process is to go through what's called an interagency consultation process. And as the TCTC is the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, we're usually the lead that helps organize that effort on behalf of the local agencies, the city or the county. And we'll bring together Caltrans, US EPA, either the FTA or FHWA, and sometimes the California Air Resources Board. And this is usually a good meeting to have everyone in the room talking and seeing if this project needs to do a air quality analysis. And essentially that's what this group would determine if the project needs to do an analysis to see if it will worsen conditions. And if it doesn't, then it wouldn't, an analysis would need to be done. So, is there anything else you wanted to add?
John?
Can you just give an example of a project that would be exempt? I recall doing one downtown Sonora would probably never be exempt under the old rules. This was a number of years ago.
Yeah, exempt projects are safety projects, bicycle pedestrian projects, transit projects, those are all exempt. And then there's other projects that are, as Alex said, are a little less clear, changes to the highway configuration, for instance, that has some both capacity increasing aspects as well as geometric changes and safety improvements, or a bridge or something like that, is a little bit of a gray area, and that's when you do what they call the interagency consultation to determine that it's exempt from review. What happens if you don't go through the process? You run the risk of losing funds or being sanctioned. So it's important.
Who gets sanctioned? A developer, the county, the city?
Well, this is primarily geared towards federally funded projects, so local agencies receiving federal funds
Okay.
would be sanctioned, particularly Federal Highway Administration or FTA funds. So it's not an onerous process. It's just a process that we have to go through. And part of so you got to go through that process. It's just an extra step in the environmental review oftentimes. And then, but on their side, you get your CMAQ funding to help also improve air quality. So the projects need to make sure they aren't making air quality worse, and then they also give us funding to actually make it better, to do other projects. Well, that's it in a nutshell. What we'll see. You know, there's a new federal transportation bill that's been talked about. Maybe it'll be out in the next year or two. That could change the game all over again. But this is where we are today.
And we're an orphan county.
That's what they call us, an orphan county.
Orphan County.
Wow.
I know, what a term to be used.
Yeah.
That's all. Just information item on this one.
All right. Any public comment? Any other questions? All right. Item 7, approval of an agreement with AMMA Transit Planning for Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan updates for Amador County, Calaveras County, and Tuolumne County, as well as short-range transit plans for Calaveras Connections and Tuolumne County Transit.
Thank you. I'm happy to report this will be a lot more straightforward. So this is an agreement.
We'll be the judge of that.
Touche. The pressure's on now.
Better live up to it.
So we got another grant. This one was a transit-oriented grant to update our coordinated plan. That's a federal plan that we have to have to be eligible for FTA and grants specifically. In the past, we've kind of done this along with Amador and Calaveras counties, and it just makes sense because we have a lot of coverage that overlaps and a lot of social service agencies that serve all 3 counties. And so we submitted a grant, actually Amador County did, but we ended up with it in the end. And we thought, well, as we're going through this process here, we also have a short-range transit plan that needs to be updated, so maybe we can kind of get a 2-for-1. Caltrans agreed to let us to bid both projects and just separate the scopes of work. And so coming before you today is a request to update our coordinated plan and our short-range transit plan at the same time. The coordinated plan will be paid for with grant funding, and the short-range transit plan will be paid for with our transportation dollars. So we had 3 different firms bid on the project: LSC out of the Tahoe area, AMA Transit Planning out of the Southern California area, and then Nelson Nygaard, which is in the Bay Area. We've worked with all 3 firms in the past. They're all 3 very good. But ultimately, the selection committee kind of preferred the approach of AMA Transit Planning, primarily because they really honed in on this kind of non-traditional approach to transit services and really taking a hard look at what's not working. I mean, they kind of keyed in on, hey, we've seen some of your previous reports and we want to help you get some improvements to your transit system here. And so that kind of bumped them ultimately to the top. And so as part of this process, we have laid out the scope so that we, at certain deliverable points, are collecting information specifically for the coordinated plan, but that will also then feed into the short-range transit plan. And in the end, what we'll bring to you are 2 separate documents to be adopted, but they will be under the same contract. So AMA Transit Planning will provide, individual coordinated plans for Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne counties, and then separately short-range transit plans for Calaveras and Tuolumne County Transit. This will be, of course, just kicking this project off. This will involve a lot of public outreach, working with human and social service organizations, working with our existing transit population, reaching out to the transit dependent, heavy coordination with the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council and Caltrans as part of this process, and we'll be keeping you up to date each step of the way here. But so that's a summary of the item before you, and if you have any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Is this where we'd insert something that might go towards the valley?
Yes, thank you. So this was the plan we referenced earlier, where we can take a look at that Yosemite service specifically for Tuolumne County between the Bay Area, Central Valley, and our mountain county.
I saw Manteca, Modesto, Merced, or I think I saw when I read that. Okay. Sorry about that.
No, that's,
Part of the thinking there is, you know, John, we can operate our system our bus on the system about $70 an hour. It's at least double that in yards. So
Right.
we're kind of looking at, maybe we operate a interregional bus down to either connecting up in Modesto or even connecting up with the ACE train in Manteca, or perhaps even farther to BART. We can keep that cheaper and then have a connection point somewhere. We've talked at times with the Visitors Bureau about doing something at Yosemite Junction. Who knows how that comes together? Maybe it connects in Sonora, but that's the thinking at this point that we're going to look at in this plan. Probably also noteworthy, as we've talked about in the past, beginning to look at how non-traditional transportation forms like Uber and Lyft, or perhaps even subsidized taxis, can work within our transit system to make us all more effective. And so we've tasked them with looking at that. And then we also know that, and we've had a lot of coordination discussions over the last 2 years with the folks at Veterans, and they're looking for more cost-effective ways of doing their run down to Palo Alto. We're going to look at ways to maybe partner with them, and maybe that's that interregional route that we're talking about that also connects with BART or somewhere. So they've been tasked with a lot of those things that we've had on our plate for a while. I should probably point out that our contract with Store is up in about 2 years. So as we work through this plan, we come up with some alternative scenarios. When we go out with an RFP for new transit operator, we can integrate some of those other components in. And it might just be as simple as reducing the number of service hours that they're guaranteed. And then we have other operators over here like Lyft and Uber, whatever the case may be. But that's when you'd see a lot of implement. Right now, we've brought our service hours on Store all the way down as far as we can go in our contract. We can't really cut much more than that, but I think 2 years out is when you'll see a lot of this. Whatever comes out of this, well, that's when you'll see it starting to be implemented pretty heavily.
question I had, I noticed that there was one proposal that was significantly less than the other two, including the one that was selected. It's at magnitude more to 10%. Are we going to have a problem because we're not choosing the low bidder, especially when there's that big of a discrepancy?
Yeah, with my understanding is with a service contract like this, the low bid component, I mean, price is one of the elements of the review, but you aren't forced into the low bid selection.
Okay. I just want to make sure we don't get in legal problems with not.
Thank you. Yeah, we did have legal counsel review the agreement prior to bringing it forward and got their signature on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's spelled out right in our request for proposal. It's about a 100-point system, and we break it into 5 different categories, 20 points each. Cost is one of the 5 criteria, but there's 4 other criteria.
Okay.
And they probably got top scores on the price, but then maybe didn't do as well in other areas.
Sure.
Have you worked with Emma before, or did they seek us out? How did this?
So we've worked with them before. They did the last coordinated plan update, and then they've done secondarily some work with Cala specifically. This will be the first time that they've done work on behalf of Amador, but 2 out of the 3 agencies they've worked on with.
Short-term memory loss or something. All right, any other questions from anybody? Public comment? All right, we'll come back for a motion on item 7.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the agreement with AMMA Transit Planning for coordinated public transit human services transportation plan, updates for Amador County, Calaveras, Tuolumne, as well as short-range transit plans for Calaveras County Connections and Tuolumne County Transit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Looks like item 8, authorize the executive director to submit an application for funding Phase 2 of a vehicle miles traveled study for the Tuolumne region.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As many of you know, SB 743 was approved by the legislature and signed by the governor a number of years ago. It's been working its way through the implementation phase, and it's going to be the law of the land come July 1, 2020, whereby CEQA will no longer be, for traffic analysis, look at level of service and congestion levels. Instead, it's going to look at the vehicle miles traveled by a given project, be it a development project or a infrastructure project. And as you know, those of you who've been around a while know that we've written many letters to the legislator and Strategic Growth Council and others about our concerns about implementing such a program in California, particularly in rural areas where there's just a total deficit of information that's necessary to do these kinds of studies. So we've faced reality that we're going to have to do this, and the city and county are happy to let us lead the effort. And part of that effort was to update our traffic model. That's phase 1. We're in the midst of the update of the traffic model. It's going well. We got a grant to do a good portion of that work. The model is going to be a state-of-the-art model, probably more advanced than any other rural county in California. It's going to be sensitive to where land uses are geographically in the county. That'll affect VMT estimates. It'll be sensitive to whether you have a transit route nearby, whether you have a bike and pedestrian facility nearby, changes to the road system and how that might affect VMT. So the model is going to be a great tool for estimating VMT now. We're ready to move to what we consider the most important phase, is the phase where we then, and the scope of work is attached for this effort, of about $160,000. Excuse me, I think I need a drink of water. So phase 2 will use the model to identify average VMT by land use in different areas of the county. It will also allow us to then have information to set thresholds of significance, which are critical for your CEQA reviews and keeping projects within that. We're hoping to do a state-of-the-art kind of system whereby if you're a certain type of project in a certain area and you've checklists that you've done sidewalks and other things and you're near a transit route, you're exempt from further CEQA review. You know, we're hoping to do a lot of that. And then there's going to be a training module to this as well, so that city and county staff that are required to implement the CEQA reviews on different projects are knowledgeable on how to use this tool as well. So it's, at the end of it all, we hope that by that July 1st, 2020 date, we are fully ready, city, county, TCTC, and frankly, Caltrans working with it as well. They're one of our partners on this too, are ready to just implement the new CEQA reform. A third phase that we may or may not do, we'll see how things are going at the end of phase 2, and if we think it's appropriate, we may look into, we've oftentimes talked about an update of our traffic impact fee program. Most of those projects are geared towards level of service, which is still maintaining level of service is still a requirement of our general plan. And I'll say that project list is in dire need of an update, but we may want to create a fee program of other types of projects that reduce VMT, like transit improvements or bicycle and pedestrian improvements, whereby if you're a project that's adds VMT, you can mitigate that by contributing a fee down the road that will reduce VMT somewhere else in the county, so our overall VMT stays under those thresholds of significance. Just a concept for phase 3. We're not there yet, but that's kind of looking ahead what we might be doing a year or two out from now. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about this scope of work or the overall effort.
Guys good? Oh,
I don't know if we're good, but
don't take that seriously. At what point do you test the model?
Probably in the next, right now, we're in the phase where we calibrate the model, where we get the model, we load in all the information about land use and the roads and the infrastructure that we have and all the different data that goes into building a computer model. And we're running it in about a week from now to make sure that it's putting out numbers of cars on the road system that replicate what we count on the road system. And there's a standard by which we have to kind of be consistent with all those volumes. And then later we'll be validating trip length information. And then subsequent to that, we'll be looking at future years. But you build a really solid base year model, and then you add in your growth that you project in your general plans and whatnot, and all the new projects for walkways and transit and other things.
Okay. Any public comment?
I should probably also mention on this project, it's 160,000. There's about 352,000 statewide. We're probably going to propose about $50,000 of local funds and hope to get a state grant for the remaining amount of 110,000. We think that this is of significant interest to the state, and we're likely to be kind of at the front of the line for funding. So that's a good ratio in our opinion.
All right, I'll entertain a motion in a second.
Chairman, I move that we authorize the Executive Director to submit an application for funding Phase 2 of a vehicle miles traveled study for the Tuolumne region.
second.
Got a motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We're going to move a couple things around, just,
Oh, good.
we're going to go to reports, and then we'll go to closed session at the very end. So with that, we'll do reports.
Okay, I just have a few. I want to mention that we did get a letter, you should have it up on the dais, from the District Director, Dan McElney. We met last month to review some of the requests we've made over the last year in relation to some of our records management, where we've identified high accident locations. And we've got status information on a lot of those. I think I reported last month that we got a commitment to see the project down at Groveland 120, where they redo some handicap ramps, a crosswalk and speed-sensitive signs. We've been assured by the district director that'll happen this summer. But we also talked about a couple other needs that we've pursued in the past. The director is very open to ideas to improve the highway system. One of the things in the past we've talked about is, and I showed him right on the map, there was a fatality on Highway 120 about halfway between, I think it was out by, I can't remember the name, but halfway.
Point.
Yeah, Buck Meadows, I think there was one.
Oh, that one.
Where it's a fatality. It seems as though they happen every year or so, maybe 2 times in a year, where somewhere between Groveland and Yosemite Gate, we have a foreign tourist coming out of maybe San Francisco in a rental car. They stop for lunch, or they get out and stretch. They get back on the highway, and maybe they're from London. We know we get a lot of visitors from Great Britain, and they drive on the wrong side of the road. They make it about a mile or a half mile, and they go around a curve, and they go head on with somebody, and somebody's killed. And so our suggestion to that is either arrows on the ground, or perhaps some of those signs with arrows showing which direction, which lane and which direction you go, as a reminder to those folks every so often on the highway. They're going to look into that. They seem to think that was a good idea. So in the past, we never got far on that, so it's kind of nice to see the district director open to ideas. Likewise, we pointed out on the map that we have an awful lot of accidents around Hearst Ranch on Highway 108-49. And it's really that corridor down there. I'd love to see a two-way left turn lane, continuous two-way left turn lane in that stretch. And I point out that in the past, the folks at Hearst Ranch have proposed a left turn pocket out there. to address it. And then, of course, we need shoulders as well in that area. So they've launched a safety investigation, and he's offered to meet with the property owners and review what they've proposed in the past. And we're going to push real hard to see if we can't get a project there. The district has a certain amount of funding for, I think, minor projects are less than $2 million now. I think we might be able to do a project for less than $2 million out there, and it doesn't have to go up to the CTC. He's got that discretion, so we're going to push hard. Carl Roderford is heavily involved in that effort, and he's excited about that project. And then, speaking of projects that we've heard from board members on, as you know, we have had some pedestrian fatalities on Stockton Road or Highway 49 west of the fairgrounds. Although my accident records map didn't show those at the time because most of those are fairly recent, I talked about them and I reminded him that we're going to have a new map, and I just got one about a week ago from CRA that shows those pedestrians, and explained to him the homeless population out there, and he turned to his staff and said, hey, what are we doing about it? And of course, nobody had an answer. We don't really have an answer yet either. This will be looked at as part of our Complete Streets Corridor Plan. We're talking about a solution, and one of the ideas that we think might work, and the district director has promised to go out and meet with us in the field and look at the situation, is maybe if we can just get 1 5-foot shoulder on what I'll call the north side, because north side has continuous sidewalk within the city, and then just stretch out a nice shoulder on one side for people to walk on, and then put some street lights along there every so often. That could make the situation quite a bit safer. We know there'll be crossings back and forth there. You know, I think we're not going to get crosswalks and things of that sort. But if we can maybe get a few street lights in the areas where they're typically crossing, we've made an improvement. And he seems to be, I like his approach of just practical solutions.
Right.
Instead of the ultimate solution that you never get to.
Yeah, it's extremely dark in places down there, and street lighting I think would be a tremendous help.
So certainly if we could have, when we coordinate that meeting, had a city rep, that'd be great
Cool.
to help
bet.
advocate.
Yeah.
So moving right along. The office move is going well. Renovation's underway. They've kind of torn out some walls. They've put up the studs and whatnot for the walls. They're ready to start drywalling, but we need IT to get in there and put in some of the technical stuff, and that's slowing us down a bit. They need to bid that out. They can't quite respond that quickly. We'll see how that goes. If we're going to be delayed, that's going to be it right there, waiting for a contractor to come in and bring in all the cable and put in all the plugs, all the appropriate places and whatnot. Picked out carpet and paint and things like that. We're all within budget. It's going well. And we also did meet with the folks at Signal Service to put in an alarm system, so that's good. So if there's no questions on that, I'll move on to, I did mention the construction has begun on the electric vehicle charging station out of Mary Laveroni Park or the Groveland Library. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that two things actually. On March 21st, I went up to the CTC workshop on Sb1 Discretionary Funds, where they rolled out basically all these performance measures that are going to be required with applications for discretionary funding that we hope to get, particularly on the 49 corridor as a result of the congested corridor plan. The good news is our team of consultants and Caltrans are all cognizant of what those are, and the new model will give us a lot of the data we need to populate those performance measures. So we're right on track. I think that's about, I did want to mention that later this month I'll be going to San Diego for the California Transit Association conference. They have a big focus on increasing ridership this year. Obviously, that's something that we need to do. So I'll be participating in that. That's all I have for reports. Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Hey, booby trapped it. That's it, Darren? Thank you. Gregoria, when you're ready.
Excellent, thank you. Good afternoon, Gregoria Bonsa, Caltrans. Caltrans, on behalf of the California Strategic Highway Safety Plan, invite the board and the executive director to participate in the outreach meeting for the development of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. As you know, District 10 is reaching out, making and continuing to make safety, partnership, and results meaningful in terms of our ongoing efforts in addressing, shared concerns along the highway. So working in concert with federal, tribal, state, and regional and local offices, we invite you all to participate in that. I did go ahead and send an invitation. Darren, if you can forward that to the board, I would greatly appreciate that. One other item that we have is part of our safety. We're doing a Safety Awareness Week, April 22nd to the 26th. Again, reminding that while we are Caltrans, we're aware that we're on the highways and byways of our partners, and we want to be mindful of not just highway traffic, but those we serve who go by us day in and day out as we're working. So we're holding a Safety Awareness Week on that. We continue to work with your grant staff. We're doing an amazing job, so thank you, on various studies underway, and Darren has touched base on several of those, and we proceed with moving with requests for reimbursements and any amendments or addendums or MOUs as we're seeing come forward. We're reviewing the fiscal year 1920 overall work plan, so thank you for making a motion on that. We appreciate that. And we'll be providing comments no later than April 12th. And I just wanted to say it looks great, the draft, your administrative draft. You guys did an awesome job. So thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Questions?
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it for reports, isn't it? All right, we're going to go to item, whatever number, closed session, public employee performance evaluation. Authority Government Code, Section 54957, Executive Director. Darren, do you know where we're going? Law Library, thank you. Right. Any public comments? Sorry about that. Thanks.
I think Darren is doing an awesome job, and so is his staff.
I already quoted you. Thank you.
Thank you.